Governments are currently a broken economic system. There are a variety of different problems that exist within government. So let's go through a number of them to understand these problems and how they could potentially be solved. Let's start with taxation. A distortionary tax is a tax that has an influence on what people or companies do. They might do less of the tax thing or switch to something else because the change in tax changes the prices or payoffs. Some examples of a distortionary tax are income tax, corporation tax, and property tax. If you tax people when they provide their labor, the higher the tax, the less there is an incentive for people to work. The more you tax company profits, the less incentive there is to start and operate a company. And the more you tax the creation or changes to a property, the less incentive there is to create and further develop properties. Distortionary taxes are not very desirable forms of taxation. If you can avoid them, you should. An economy benefits from enabling as much labor, company formation, and property development as possible, generally speaking. Why would any society want to reduce these forms of economic activity due to taxation? This then brings us to non-distortionary taxes. These taxes do not result in a reduction of the thing that is being taxed. And there are two great examples of that which we previously talked about: land value taxes and demerged money. If you tax land, you don't get less land. If you tax money, you don't get less money. The money and land value that gets taxed could help to pay for government services. So one way that taxation systems could be improved is by adopting land value taxes and money taxes. Governments should look to slowly reduce income taxes, corporation taxes, and property taxes in favor of land value taxes and money taxes. Adopting non-distortionary taxes like land value taxes and money taxes are some of the most compelling tax changes for fixing governments and their approach to taxation. One more thing on taxes. Another useful tax to consider is corrective taxes, also called Pigovian taxes. These taxes help with resolving negative externalities. Let's outline an example. Say a country had a national health service, paid for by everyone's taxes. The problem with healthcare is people can treat their bodies very differently across society. On one side, some people eat very healthy food, exercise regularly, and do everything they can to track their health and look after themselves. Whereas other people might decide to eat food that is terrible for them, and they might also not exercise at all. The problem with these differences is people that are unhealthy due to their own choices are benefiting from other people's tax contributions proportionally more than the people who are healthy and don't need to use public health services as regularly. This makes the tax system less fair for those that are being more responsible with their own health. One of the unhealthy habits people might have is smoking cigarettes. This habit results in a negative externality, as the health service will need to support the problems that emerge due to this habit. The health-related costs involved with smoking cigarettes aren't included in the cost of buying them unless you add a tax. This is a reason to adopt a corrective tax. If you can roughly work out the health costs of people smoking cigarettes, you can think about how to add a consumption tax. A tax on purchasing cigarettes would help with paying for the future costs that this habit will have on the public health service. The more that people smoke, the more they contribute through taxation, which helps to pay for the services they will likely need in the future. Now, of course, there can be other ways to solve this problem, but there's definitely merit in considering corrective taxes to solve specific problems when providing certain public services. The next problem with governments that we should discuss is around systems and processes. Let's start with the election process and thinking about democracy. A common implementation for a democratic election process is that political parties are elected for around 4 to 5 years. The first problem with this approach is that the input from the population can be highly limited. The only vote that they might have could come every 4 to 5 years, and that's just to select a political party that they want to support. Politicians could make a number of decisions and introduce policies that do not represent the preferences of the population. There's often a lack of systems that are effective for gathering opinions and preferences in a structured manner. Currently, you generally see a lot of people sharing things on social media. So, one potential improvement could be exploring things like liquid democracy, where people can directly vote on certain policy changes, but they can also delegate their vote to someone else. This suggestion could be particularly important for the most impactful policy changes, ones that really influence people's lives. This could help with reducing the dependence on the 4 to 5 year election cycle and instead mean that people have more influence over these big decisions. Voters could delegate to one or multiple people for different topic areas, like finance, agriculture, infrastructure, healthcare, etc. An ideal system is one where people can vote and participate in exactly the way they want to. This suggestion is obviously pretty complex to implement in a reliable and secure manner, so realistically, it won't be happening anytime soon. Many of these technical solutions could come from emerging Web3 ecosystems, as these ecosystems also need to create their own governance systems as well. In doing so, the technology and tools might become more readily available for national governments who can then start to adopt these solutions. It's quite difficult to believe that these innovations will come from governments themselves, as for the most part, they've mostly been lagging behind with both the development and the adoption of new technology, along with improving their own internal processes. Another issue with this longer cycle of changing politicians in government is how it incentivizes them to act. It might be obvious to politicians why something like land value taxes could be beneficial for society over the long term. But if this land value tax suggestion is not popular enough in the immediate term, politicians are not as highly incentivized to push for it as a policy in their campaigns. If they do this and the public don't yet agree, they might lose votes and the wider election. Good ideas that improve society over the long term could be ignored for years or even decades when this happens, potentially delaying any chance of economic recovery. Liquid democracy could again help with this problem, as you could remove the 4 to 5 year election cycle and enable people to delegate their voting power to people and change that delegation whenever they want to. This can help to prevent the problems of governments enacting policies that are now not representing the preferences of the population, which might have changed since a political party was elected. Liquid democracies would help voters with directly participating and voting, or updating their voting delegation whenever they wanted to do so. Another important factor for systems and processes is around how fast a government is able to update itself and improve its own systems and processes internally. The world around us is changing at a rapid rate. New innovations and technologies such as AI, robotics, and Web3 are completely changing our economies and wider society. Governments are currently struggling to keep up with the rate of innovation and with creating policies and legislation that protect society and that are also aligned with the preferences and interests of the population they serve. And this rate of change doesn't seem to be slowing down. If anything, it seems to be speeding up. So a slow government can be catastrophic for society, as it lags behind the adoption of new ideas and technology. This is a big reason a government needs to be nimble and fast enough to improve themselves over time and become more efficient. Evolution of internal systems and processes become increasingly important if you want to govern and support a society that is rapidly changing and potentially getting much more complex. It's hard to say that many existing governments have been demonstrating this ability to improve themselves internally. And this stagnation is a big ongoing concern. Incentives is another area that needs some attention within government and public services. In company settings, it is more common to see some form of performance measurement to reward high performers with bonuses or salary increases. This isn't as prominent in the public sector, and this could negatively impact performance. If it doesn't make a difference whether someone works hard or not in any given job, the incentives are not well aligned to encourage people to give their absolute best. So, inspiration could be taken from existing organizations on how to better reward performance and any impactful contributions. This could help with better aligning the incentives for everyone that contributes towards society, regardless of whether you work in the private sector or public sector. A final thing that needs to be mentioned is whether governments cause unearned income. If social welfare exists, people can receive some form of public benefit without needing to contribute anything. This is a form of unearned income. But the purpose of this unearned income is to solve a social problem. The income by itself doesn't give someone the ability to generate compounding returns and consolidations in ownership of a specific asset. So this particular unearned income isn't directly leading to increasing levels of inequality or something that breaks the economic system. It is the other economic systems like land, money, and companies with shareholders that do have problems with unearned income. Let's wrap up. Governments currently have a lot of problems. Those problems aren't related to unearned income. Instead, they are about how government operates, how it taxes people, and how it is able to evolve and adapt in a fast-changing environment. So governments are a problem as they can prevent or slow down the adoption of solutions that solve the unearned income problems for economic systems like land, money, and companies that are owned with permanent shares of ownership. We've covered a variety of example areas where many governments could be improved. And of course, there's plenty more issues we could talk about when thinking about our existing government systems. If governments fail to evolve quickly enough, the solutions might need to come from elsewhere, such as from the Web3 industry. These solutions could then be adopted within governments to solve different problems. Governments are currently stagnating and a broken economic system. They are commonly failing to adopt taxation approaches and policies that would help with economic recovery. Governments need to evolve and improve themselves efficiently to handle a world that is rapidly changing. Most importantly, in the short term, they need to consider the adoption of land value taxes and using this taxation approach to slowly reduce and remove a number of undesirable distortionary taxes. And then in the future, they also need to adopt demerged money and support the adoption of temporary shares of ownership. Let's finish with a vision for the future economy. See you soon.